Welcome back, thinkers, to Season 5, Episode 3 of Thinking Critically, and thank you for your patience. I know it's been a long time coming. It's that time of year, as I mentioned at the top of the previous episode, where there's just everything's popping off right now. I'm preparing for a new campaign. Anyway, thank you for returning to the show. Really good one. If you like what you hear, like the episode, please do drop a follow on your podcast platform of choice or leave a review. That would be fantastic. Just a couple of words would make my absolute year. Check out all the socials and the website at thinkingcritically.co.uk, where there's everything you could ever want to do with the show is on there. I also want to give a shout out to the Tale of the Manticore podcast. I was exceptionally fortunate enough to be asked to be a voice actor on the show for a little guest spot, one of the NPCs. It's a dark fantasy D&D podcast, kind of half solo actual play, half story, completely different to Dungeons, Dice and Dudes. Definitely not a comedy show, but very exciting, very enthralling. I definitely go and check it out at Manticore Tale on Twitter or taleofthemanticore.podbean.com. I was on episode 39 as well as on episode a couple of before that. Hopefully you'll recognize my voice, maybe. And it's a really good listen. So really, really fortunate to have got the opportunity to go and check out that podcast as well. And of course, I've had the host of that show, John, on Thinking Critically before, all the way back in Season 3, Episode 1 with Story. So if you like what you hear here, if you like what you hear in Tale of the Manticore, definitely go and check out that episode. Otherwise, let's get on with this episode. And today I'm joined by Lionne Cosplay. Thank you ever so much for joining us today, Anya. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Anya. I use she, her pronouns. I am American, but I live in Germany. I've been here for quite a number of years now. I am, if you couldn't guess, I'm a cosplayer, but I am also a professional game master. I am an actual play performer, DM, GM, all that jazz. I also write a lot. A lot of different games, not just for D&D, but also my own kind of like little indie projects.
Wow. Writing is something that I need to do a lot more of, and that's where I'll leave my my thoughts on that. Well, good. A very good person to have on for today's topic, which is immersion. So what does that mean to you in the D&D and wider TTRPG framework?
So immersion for me, it's not just like, yes, you're getting into a story, you're telling a story together. It is getting the right notes, getting the right vibe in your game. So a really good example is I always use frame of reference with things that I've run or written. My game Mountaintop Isolation is all about like psychological horror. You're trapped, isolated, alone on a mountaintop. If you couldn't tell, it's a Wretched and Alone game. But it has not just that creepy vibe of all of these weird, strange things happening to you as you are getting deeper and deeper into being trapped in a blizzard on top of a mountain. But you have that aspect of the tumbling block tower, as they call it, that precariousness of it and the fear that drives in you. And that kind of delves you a little bit deeper into it, and it makes it more immersive of an experience for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what a great topic. I'm frankly, I'm surprised it's taken me so long to get here, but I'm very glad we have, because it is one of those things that I think every GM struggles with at some point, and there are various things you can do. I'm looking up here at my 4, 8, 12, 15, 16 candles or so that, to set the scene, to set some ambiance.
Yeah.
There's those like physical things you can do to help with the immersion. Obviously that only helps in person. But
Mm.
it is one of those things that's like more of an art than a science, I feel. As is with a lot of GMing, I think, to be fair, is trying to bring people in. So I guess the candles are a good place to start. Do you feel it's like harder to do that if it's a remote game versus an in-person game?
It can be for sure. A lot of GMs, what they do is they incorporate music and sound
Hmm.
into it to make it more immersive. Oh, a good example of that. I had a GM once who, whenever things were kind of dragging a little bit, or, people were doing a little bit too much,
Hmm.
so he would start playing sounds, and it would be things like, "Oh, I just heard a wolf howl. Oh, y'all, we need to start paying attention now because something is about to happen." And it wasn't even just the players being cued into it. It was, okay, now the characters
Ooh.
need to cue in as well. Do they notice that this has
Hmm.
happened?
There is a Machiavellian joy in that, like just sitting back and pressing the button and playing the sound, and then being like, the arched fingertips of,
Oh, yeah.
and then the players being like, "Whoa," looking to the GM for a cue, and you being like, "Well, it is what it is. You heard what
Yeah.
you heard. There's nothing more for me to add right
Mhm.
now."
Yeah, and, that's definitely one thing that I need to explore a little bit
Mm.
more. I don't do sound and music in my games. I make my own sound effects. Whether those are good or not, I think you'd have to ask my players, but it's just it's a more challenging, technologically wise,
Mm.
thing to do that I just haven't really delved into yet.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I made a whole in my humble beginnings when I was just DMing just for my mates in person. I had a whole Spotify playlist. It was like 30 hours
Mhm.
long of. Well, I had several actually. One for like sad, D&D happy, D&D like river. They were like, "Oh, an NPC's dying. Sorry, 1 second. Let me just scroll. Got to find the playlist. Sad. Now you're all going to feel sad." But of course, moving to online and streaming and stuff, you've got to be a little bit more careful around that stuff because so many pitfalls out there of streaming music and all that kind of stuff that,
Oh, absolutely.
and in addition to the technical overhead of being like, but I need to hear it and they need to hear it. So how can
Mhm.
I plumb those two streams like to come out of the stream itself correctly was one that I never really bothered to resolve. We messed around in Discord for a bit, but then
Mm.
since moving to something else, I was like, feel free to play your own music in your own living rooms, guys, and we'll just you can be your own DJ for a change.
Yep.
And to be frank, from me as a DM perspective, kind of already had enough on my plate anyway, as certainly with the streaming. So it was like I'm kind of happy to just let that fall by the side.
Mhm. Yeah, we're already doing so many other things. Just
Hmm.
adding another element just makes it a little bit too much.
Yes, yeah, and the reason I'm saying all of this is because I can't help. Maybe it's just that imposter syndrome, voice at the back of your head, but I can't help but feel it has impacted the immersion. Even if sometimes the music wasn't always spot on, or even sometimes it to be like, oh, that's way too jolly for this intimidation check we're doing. Let me just skip. Even if always it wasn't quite on the mark, the lack of it, I can only help as negatively impacted immersion. So yeah, I'm soon to be DMing a person again, and I'm greedily rubbing my hands together, happy to get back to having some local ambiance.
Mm. Well, what's interesting to me is you just made me think about it. I personally have never actually GM'd in person before.
Oh,
I've
okay,
played games in person before. We didn't have any music or sound effects or anything like that. My first TTRPG that I ever played was Serenity, based off
okay,
of the Firefly and
yes,
TV show and Serenity movie. It came out in 2005, and it has a couple of problematic elements, but it was my first TTRPG. I absolutely adored it, and it didn't matter to us to have music or anything like that
mm,
because it was just we were exploring this world of cowboys in space, and it didn't matter to us to have, like, the sound of the ship creaking around us or anything like that.
yeah. How I don't want to be rude, but do you think age has a part to play with like how easy it is to immerse yourself? Because obviously kids run off into their fairy tale lands 24/7. Do you think there's a scale there?
I don't think so, because the GMs that I know who use music in and sound effects and things like that, they are all different ages.
Hmm.
So I really don't think that that has anything to do with it. I will say that I feel like people who I'm using myself as an example, but people who have a theater background sometimes have an easier time of escaping into these worlds because we are just fully into it. Especially when I'm streaming, a lot of times I'm in costume.
Oh wow.
And that's part of my immersion into the
Yeah.
world and into my character is that I will dress up as them. I
Hmm.
have so many weird costumes.
That I also really lean into that. I mean, I'm not, because obviously I had Sarah on the production episode from Girls from These Worlds as well, and
Mhm.
she also within the first 10 minutes said, "I'm a theatre kid," and now there's a theme appearing. Now I did play Oliver in the school production of Oliver, so
Okay.
maybe that qualifies me, maybe
It
not. I don't know.
absolutely does.
But I am also a fan of like fancy dress and also dressing up. I've got a big drawer downstairs full of
Mm.
very cheap wigs and hats and stuff. But when it's just for like an one-off NPC, that's more than enough. And again, one of those things I am very much looking forward to, dusting off and bringing out again, just because I think that for me is a huge, like the physicality of it is a
Mm.
huge. Even if you just play it for laughs, like the most two-dimensional way to do it is still like people are laughing and having fun. You've already improved the mood, but even if you play it, straight for any other thing, it's just. I think that's a great
Mm.
idea. If you can, again, mine are very cheap, so it's not as if you have to. They're literally like if you take a match to the wig, I'd be bald in a second.
Oh, I'm looking over at my 20 drawers filled with wigs and no, mm-mm.
We all have our vices. I think it's fair to say.
Is cosplay a vice? I thought it was just a hobby.
Well, I see what the bank manager has to say, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about that then a little bit much. You obviously merged those two hobbies of yours together and
Mhm.
presumably to fantastic effect. Like, is that fun? Do your players enjoy it?
I love it. I do it more as a character, as a PC than as a GM.
Oh, okay.
In part because my wigs oftentimes you have to glue them to your forehead.
Wow.
I
Okay.
I have the really nice lace wigs and
You got
things like that.
the good stuff. Yeah.
Yes. But when I'm a player, it isn't just that I'm wearing the costume. It makes me kind of change my posture, change
Mm,
how I speak. Like if I'm trying to think of examples of my specific characters, like Adelaide from the Vampire the Masquerade game. She was very much a fashionista, straight backed.
mhm,
She had this air of, I am the most beautiful, most important person in this room, and everyone will look at me. But at the same time, there was this timidity to her that there were only a couple of people that would notice that. And I always made sure to play that. And so all the time, and I think that this is my theater background again, when the spotlight isn't on me, my character is still reacting to what's going on because acting is what you do when you are not saying lines.
mm,
And so for me, part of that is portraying how they are reacting to what is happening around them.
mhm. Oh, we're getting an education on this episode, listeners. So, if that's not a reason to sign up for a Patreon, I don't know what is. But um, I love this train of thought because I feel like from my experience, also the things I've done now in conventions and from friends and stuff, I do feel like that we're moving away from the gym to player, trying to immerse
Mhm.
yourself as a player now, which to be honest, I didn't even think, didn't even enter my brain that. trying to embody the character is something
Mhm.
that is ashamedly left kind of by the wayside a lot of the time. I rarely have thought about it when I've been the character, but I think, yeah, putting on some element, be it a hat or a jacket or anything, to
Mhm.
it can just be that trigger to be like, okay, let me slouch, or let me sit up straight, or let me hold my drink in a certain way. Is like, you're going to get like 400% returns on your investment for doing that in terms of immersion.
Yeah, and it's even simple things like, how do you hold yourself? And, I mean, when you're online, this is a little bit more difficult, but how do you walk? Like, what part of your body are you leading with when you
Mm,
walk? Because that changes your posture, it changes how you're moving around. And when you think about that, you're thinking about, okay, why is this character walking like that? Why is this person talking out of the corner of their mouth
mm.
so that they're slurring the words a little bit? Uh, Things like this, like, what is the reasoning behind that? And that kind of expands that world for you a little bit more.
Because often it is just like, and it's no bad thing. Like, we've all been like, you and I today have finished work and are now doing this. Like, there's the amount of games that people are like, I've lived my life today, and now I just kind of want to sit down and just throw some dice. So absolutely no shade, but if you get the opportunity, or you get those rare occasions where it's like, I'm bright eyed and I'm bushy tailed, then I can only, yeah, encourage it. I'm definitely going to try and, going into GMing a bit more soon, I'm definitely going to try and think about that a little bit more. Keep that in the back of my mind to try and do it a little bit more, rather than just, I'm sat in my office or I'm sat at the chair to get the players. But now I've got a couple of sessions left as a player. I'm
Uh-huh.
trying to think about what I can do in that short frame of time now as a player, to really make the most of it, to bring me into that character. But do you think there are a lot of parallels then between, let's say, I mean, I've done an episode on acting, but do you think,
Mhm.
for lack of a better term, there are a lot of parallels between acting and being a player in a TTRPG?
I think there are, and of course, not all players are actors.
Hmm.
Of course not, but I do feel like actors and former actors are more drawn to, especially the streaming side of things, simply because this is another form of acting. It
Hmm.
is improv, and there are dice that affect you, or cards if it's something like Aether, but you are affected by this other entity, but then you have to roll with what happens. And it's always yes and. That concept from acting, that you never negate what your scene partner has said, you build off of it.
Hmm. Which is a core tenet, basically, of most TTRPGs, I think, in
Mhm.
general play, shall we say.
Yeah.
So, in addition to popping on a wig or a set of glasses or sitting in a certain way, what else do you think as a player you can do? Because obviously, the majority of TTRPG players are on one side of the screen than
Yeah.
there's more players than there are GMs. So, this is more value to those. What else do you think you can do as a player to either immerse yourself, or, I guess, more importantly, immerse the 4, 5 other people at the table and help them get embedded into the game?
Well, me being me, I love role play. And
Hmm.
so a really good example of this is, was it yesterday? Time is a weird soup.
Hmm.
Um I have, what day of the week is it? It's Thursday.
Thursday.
This morning. This morning at
All the
6
way back
a.m.
this morning.
because I run games sometimes for people who, it's evening on the West Coast USA, so it's 6 a.m. for me.
Mhm. Wow.
But I am running a Monster of the Week game, and I had the set scenes of, okay, this is a point in time, this is a point in time. What happens in between this? And so I'm there a little bit more to prompt the players. Like, of course, I have the mystery and everything that they need to solve, I'm guiding things. However, I gave them that space to kind of play. And so they kind of riffed off of each other to create this moment that I was not expecting. There was an Auntie Anne's in a liminal space mall, and they named the woman behind the counter, and they like were just having this banter back and forth with her. And it just makes it so much more fun, and it really shapes the world just a little bit more and makes that, I'm gonna keep plugging the word of the episode, it immerses it just a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that like I like how in that example you said like you were the GM. However, that argument is the same for players, like giving other players and even the GM in some
Mhm.
cases that space, as you put it, to be like you guys go off and do and have that back and forth and have that yes and we'll see where it takes us is, you know, very like you can tell when people are like in the zone or having
Oh,
a
yeah.
moment like of really vibing, like, and it can be a huge benefit. Just be like, okay, I'm gonna let that see it through to its end because I'm really enjoying
Mhm.
being just watching it happen.
It was very entertaining, and there were moments where I was just like, "Okay, I can say something now. No, they're still going? Okay." They're having their moment, and I was enjoying watching them have that
Yes.
moment.
Yes, you have to cherish those moments as a GM,
Mhm.
because the next session you'll be staring at four dumbfounded faces who don't know what to do. So, in turn, we spoke briefly earlier on about music and sound, I guess to a lesser extent, for the GM to help immerse their players. As we discussed, being remote, as a lot of games are, there are barriers to entry. So,
Mhm.
often we're left with our voices and to a lesser extent our torsos or portraits.
Yep.
So with those tools that basically everybody has, their language and their face, um, how can you try and immerse people, as you said, that are maybe on the other side of the world through a screen? What tips or tricks have you picked up in that time?
I am very expressive, and no one else can see this, but you can. Like, I am constantly gesturing, and I make myself big. I'm already forgetting your question, but I do everything I can to fill the space,
hmm
basically.
like filling the space. Often it
Mhm.
has connotations of like physically, but also you
Mhm.
can do that with your voice. So what would like?
Mhm.
So the question was like, how do you kind of arrest attention and immerse your players when you're through two screens and a camera or on the other side of the world, and your voice and your gesticulating
Mhm.
is certainly ways to do it. I need to again. My accents of my girlfriend will tell you I can't. She just says, "Stanley, don't do it because you can't do it. So just don't try it because it will be
Mhm.
bad." And she'll be like, "Oh, they're Geordie. Do a Geordie accent." That was Welsh. Okay, fine, whatever. Moving on. Uh, so that's something I struggle with. So I guess let's leverage your theatre background a little bit more. Then, have you
Okay.
got any advice then for doing NPC voices?
So if you can't do accents, and I am not the best at them, like I run Serenity now as a pro GM. And so if you know the characters, I cannot do Badger's accent. I cannot do Fanty and Mingo's accents. I am not going to even attempt to mangle them.
hmm
It is not good. And so instead, what I'm doing is again, like I had said, I change kind of how I hold myself, my posture, and I like with Fanty and Mango, I find myself because they're twins. If for those who don't know, they're identical twins and they dress alike except for like different colored cravats or ties, whatever. And so I find myself shifting in my seat to look at myself, basically. And I'm kind of like doing a motion, like a side to side motion, because they kind of are doing that constantly just
mm
to talk to each other. And so I try to go more for the mannerisms if I can't do the accent.
hmm Yeah, and that is actually something you can take into in-person games as well. And again,
Mhm.
my problem is I always my brain is going a million miles per hour whenever I'm DMing, and it's always on like the words. What I have
Mm.
to think really really hard to filter it through, get down those biases out the way, and try and think about what this NPC would do in this without me trying to be like a mean DM or a too soft
Mhm.
DM, and like so trying to navigate those currents takes up like 90% of my CPU running time. Which is wrong because I should. I need to spend more time on those flourishes, on those like moving around and then getting up and walking around and sitting up straight and that kind of stuff, because
Mhm.
it's just like you don't get to do that in any other medium, so you may as well do it all.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, I'm just trying to rattle through a couple of major NPCs and thinking like, what can I do for her? What can I do for them? What can I do for him?
Mhm.
Like, and that's now some homework. The double-edged sword of this podcast is it always gives me homework. Every time I speak to somebody, I'm like, okay, great, now I know I've got to go and do that.
Well, it lets you get to play with how you GM, and then you can maybe adapt some pieces that, yes, that works for you, but oh no, that doesn't work
Mm,
for you. Because every GM is different.
mhm,
Some people are the full effects, the epic stories, things like that, where they know where every single piece and every single NPC is at all times. I personally don't go that route, and I think part of, for me as a GM, the immersion aspect is that I have key moments or key people, very very rough, very basic. I'll have a couple of paragraphs of things that I know that I want to say for describing, but besides that, what my players do determines completely what happens. Like, I have run this one particular Monster of the Week module probably 10 times at this point, and every single time something different happens.
mhm.
Every single time. And like one time, I had a player decide that he needed to go to a thrift store, and I was just like, "Well, now there's a thrift store there, and because you have created this thrift store, added something to this world, well, the girl behind the counter knows something about this mystery that you're trying to solve."
Mhm.
And so I reward the creativity of my players, and they're exploring this world that they're in with little hints, little clues, just fun things, fun elements.
They say that, what's the saying? Insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. And yet, the thing I love about TTRPGs is that you can have the same variables
Mhm.
and it can always blindside you. It's gonna be in fact, when I start jamming soon, that'll be the third ish iteration of this kind of world that I've built up, and I'm expecting it now with experience to go completely different again, for the third time, because even with the same, like, you're in this town and there's these NPCs and this is happening. Okay, well, I want to go to the thrift shop. Okie dokie.
There's a
So
thrift shop now. It is called I don't know. My first thought in my brain was the violet sofa. I don't know why, but it's the violet sofa now, and you go in, and there's all this bric-a-brac all around, and the thing that you're looking for, perception check or whatever it may be,
Mhm,
is on a shelf very high up, and you need a ladder, and so you build off of that,
mm,
and
mhm.
it just creates a world, and no one knows what you're going to expect. I don't know what I'm going to expect because it just randomly appeared.
So, so that's one reason why I do love TTRPGs. That same input, different output is, from my
Mhm.
very programmatic brain and background. That's it scratches that itch for me very much. Spending my working day dealing with computers and stuff. So when we are building worlds, which I know is emphasized more or less depending on the system you're in, what can you do there as a world builder, as a GM, to help with bringing the players into that world? Because I know I've done it in the past where you're either improvising or you've not done enough prep, or it's the first session with new players who are like, I'm looking at may as well be a blank piece of paper, and I don't,
Mhm.
as all writers will tell you, a blank piece of paper is the hardest thing to look at. As soon as you get one word on there, it's fine. But
Yeah,
getting over that first blank bit of paper, metaphor for TTRPGing.
absolutely. I know exactly what you mean, don't worry.
So yeah, how like as a GM, what can we do to in those situations with our world building?
It depends on if it's a one shot or a campaign, because I do run a lot of one shots.
Hmm.
And so for campaigns, what I will always do is I will have my players, especially for something like Monster of the Week. I just recently started this campaign, so it's very much on my brain,
Mhm.
but I will have them add in some elements of the story. So they will get to create, oh, well, what's the favorite diner of the group?
Mhm.
After you've had a long day slaying monsters, where do you go? What is the prank that you pull on this other character? And so like I draw in all of these elements that they get to create the world, and we go from there. Another campaign that's on pause right now, I have a Kids on Brooms campaign, and that one is extremely the players create the world. And so we have an underground, I can do words, school. I say that sometimes. No, we have an underground school underneath Paddington Station in London. And it is the Paddington School for the Arcane Arst, because someone putting up the sign switched the letters, and because it was put up there, it's permanent and forever. So that had to be the name of the
Arst.
school. And it was legitimately because I was writing things down and I accidentally switched the letters, and I told my players, and they were like, "No, that's funny. Keep it."
Yeah, I love that. I have seen tips and tricks before of like a session zero, a big part of that being like, okay, well, here's some land masses, but let's
Mhm.
populate it together. Have you ever done anything like that?
Not the entire world itself. I would say that the Kids on Brooms game is the closest to that, because we created a couple of different key locations. Like there's the Yarhazy Woods that is 10 meters by 10 meters from the outside, and it's in the center of the school. But as soon as you enter, it is this massive forest. And I didn't come up with that. One of my players did.
Mhm.
They also came up with, oh, well, there's a theater class. And I was just like, cool. It is haunted by Shakespeare's ghost. And one of the players decided that like he was coming from the States to this school, and so he had a cell phone he was constantly trying to keep in contact with his brother, and so he would go over to the Starbucks, and I was like, cool, there's suddenly a Starbucks in this magical world, whatever. I mean, it's underground from London proper, so I think that works. It's fine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I bought in I call it a dwarf box because it's run by dwarfs. But I love the juxtaposition of something that's very, very ultra modern and capitalist in a very, very fantasy setting, and having the two, smushing the two together and being like, yeah,
Mhm.
you can just get like hot coffee here, and
Yeah.
it's just something that you would not expect to see. And I think my players liked it the couple of times they went. I like to think, at least I tell myself that when I'm building new ones.
I did actually listen to Philippa's episode where you did talk about that. So I was like, oh,
Ah.
yes.
Yeah, so it's again, as I said before, I sound like my dad. Don't want to repeat myself. More of an art than a science, and that immersion it's both as a player and a GM. It's very easy to get, you know, not see the wood for the trees and just be like, well,
Mhm.
I'm doing the rote, I'm doing
Yeah.
the here's 4 NPCs, and here's a shop, and here's the
Mhm.
city that it's in, but kind of lose the, the soft edges on those to make it a little bit more engaging, a little bit more like, well,
Yeah.
there's the shop, so, and this guy is, his name is Joe, and that's it,
Mhm.
without kind of losing those soft edges. And it's something that I also, and again, as I said, I'm quite who put it, I think it was Philippa. She said that my, was it brain, what was the type of brains you can have, like one's quite programmatic,
Oh,
and you're
I
the
remember I
you're
remember
the
her
creative or
talking
not, right?
about, yeah, creative, being a visual learner
Yeah,
or
yeah.
things like that.
So I'm very like douche douche douche, and so it's something I struggle with, to be like, let me
Mhm.
like break that mold and go out of a bit to try and make this world be
Mhm.
alive, rather than just like a Lego block set of
Yeah.
scenes one after the other.
I have a very good example of that. So there's this one module that I run that's called the Modron Maze, and I believe it's
Oh,
free if you want to get it. But it is one of those that it is a dungeon delve classic with a twist because the Modrons are trying to collect data
hmm,
and figure out what the perfect dungeon is to, just
yeah.
to establish this. So it's you are dungeon experiment 73. And so you get transported into this 30 by 30 room that looks like if you have been told what farming equipment and farms look like and you're drawing it from that memory 10 years later.
Hmm.
So it's just wild things that have been painted. It looks terrible. It's wild. But basically, you're going from room to room, solving puzzles, going through dilemmas, things like that. There's combat. And I have only had one time where the players very clearly didn't quite get it.
Okay.
And they were very much, we have done the task, go to the next room. We have done the task, go to the next room. They weren't, to me, it felt like they weren't immersed in it and they weren't having fun because they were so focused on task A, task B, task
Yeah.
C, you know?
That sounds. I love modrons.
Mm-hmm.
I have a module in my homebrew campaign that has those. Just that desire for perfection, that
Yeah.
the mechanical element to it. It just ticks so many boxes for me, and they look cute as heck as well.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's just fantastic. But I love that trying to find the perfect dungeon. I'm gonna look for that because I might be able to
Yeah,
slot
look
that
it
in.
up because it is a really fun one.
That farming equipment thing reminded me of that meme where it's like old-fashioned paintings of cats, and the thing is like, you can paint a cat, what a cat looks like,
Yeah.
right? And they're like, yeah, yeah, sure, but then all the cats are like got
Oh
six
my
legs and like
God.
elongated snouts and look very suspicious.
Yeah, well, think about it this way. Imagine a bicycle in your head and
Yeah.
then try to draw it.
Hmm.
It is really hard to do without referencing the actual bicycle.
Hmm.
And so it's a similar kind of thing. And one of the elements, I don't remember if it's actually in the module or if I made it up, but do you know the painting American Gothic?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that I have in there is that you find a guy that is called Farmer Modron, and he is looking for his daughter, Maiden Modron. And there is a painting on the wall that is basically them in American Gothic style.
And they're
Just
acting
standing
the
straight.
parts, right? Like beep
Oh,
boop.
yeah.
Yeah,
The Maiden Modron just has a flower stapled or taped, whatever,
yeah.
to her head, and the farmer Modron has the straw hat and a piece of straw sticking like
Hmm.
glued to his mouth.
I think when the one time I ran it as like a one shot just to test the
Mhm.
waters, I think I had them. I had, but oh well, I'm going to loop it back to what we were talking about earlier on. I had a sound effect planned,
Ah,
uh,
yeah.
and it was the 56K dial-up modem sound, and I was like,
Okay.
this creature approaches you, opens its mouth, and you hear this noise, and just play that, and the players were like,
Mhm.
right, okay, well, do I understand that? You hear that noise. I don't know what else to tell you.
Amazing. One of my friends, he's my moderator on Twitch and is a wonderful human being. He suggested, I think it was this morning. Time is weird.
Hmm.
When I have these long days, I don't know what time is anymore. But he suggested, because he's also British, he said, "Hey, I should do some recordings if you want for your Serenity game because then they can just be random recordings from people that have been
Mm.
sent over." And I was just like, this is an excellent idea. I love it.
So you got like a soundboard, or are they longer pieces?
I don't know. We've
Oh, it's
just
going to be a
like
pleasant surprise.
it's
Lovely.
we'll see what happens, but he has like a full setup. He has
Nice.
like 20 guitars. Yes, I think when we play, he has to go through like 50 different sound things to find where his mic is. But
Inputs, you mean? Yes,
yeah,
yeah.
inputs.
Yeah, I'm bamboozled by my 2-input interface down here, so that's it. It's done. It's been done once right, and now I'm never going to touch it again because it's working. So yes, I can I can imagine it's like a
Mhm.
different. It's like a completely different beast.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, I've just thinking about Modrons is just making me happy now. I'm just smiling, just trying to think of cute little crazy things for them to do.
Yep.
The plan I have, we're going off on a segue now, but
Yeah,
whatever.
that's fine.
The plan I have was partly inspired by Star Trek to a certain extent. Obviously, they're all like there's like a Modron Prime or something like that. There's some like leader because they're all they're a very clear hierarchy in terms of like
Yeah.
management with the Modrons all the way up to the top, the big boss man. And I'd had in my head that like a sect had broken away, a bit like I think in a couple of Star Treks, there's like where there's some Borg that have broken away from the collective, and they're like, "What is happening?" Because I've got my sentience back, and it's scary. So that's the kind of vibe I wanted to get. They might find a little sect of like Modrons somewhere who are like, "Am I making a house? I don't know what is happening. I'm just trying to like." Now I'm not being controlled by this huge machine. Literally, I'm now just trying to make my way in this crazy topsy world that is on a gear.
It sounds
So
a little Doctor Who to me
yes,
with the Cybermen a little
yeah,
bit.
absolutely, yeah. I can imagine. So, oh yeah. Now it's getting all my creative juices flowing again, which is making me very happy. So, from your perspective, then let's flip it a little bit. From the times that you've been a player in anything,
Mhm.
what things have you found to be like, wow, okay, I'm engaged now, or I know exactly where I am, or I'm really in the moment? Like, what things have other players done or other DMs done for you that's really stood out and been like, okay, I'm here, I'm present?
Oh, I'm trying to think.
It's a difficult question because there's probably millions and millions of examples and across the weird timey-wimey soupy business. So
Exactly. Well, I'm thinking back to when we did the Vampire the Masquerade game, it's on Manapot Studios. They're all on YouTube now. But we did a 3-part series in the fall, and at the end of the last episode, we went, "Oh no, this is a prequel, isn't it?"
mhm,
And so then we went on to do another 3 episodes, I think, in the spring.
mhm,
But I think that thinking about that, the immersive moment for me was when Krifu, the GM, he pulled in one of my, I'm forgetting the terms now, but one of my connections.
mhm,
He brought in my character's ex-girlfriend. And so he pulled on that moment, and I had this realization of, oh no, she is not ready to see her. She can't, this is really, and it's not like scary or dangerous or anything like that. It's her heart has been broken.
mm,
And I didn't actually realize that until that moment. And so there was this just little connection between me and another player where I hid behind her and she like checked in with me, "Are you okay?" And that spurred their relationship,
mm.
actually. It was very beautiful, chaotic, like disaster lesbian vampires, amazing. I adored it. But it all stemmed from our GM bringing in that NPC at a very raw, vulnerable moment.
Mm,
And Adelaide had to take a step back and hide and compose herself. And that pulled in so much more into perspective for me for who Adelaide was, why she was there, and a little bit more about her backstory that I
mm,
hadn't even explored yet.
mm. Yeah, I think I've been there when other players have had those familial moments with
Mhm.
NPCs, and I've just been sitting there like something big's about to happen.
Yeah.
Just watching them really, have that intense moment, and you'll come out the other side, and you're almost like, "Are we? Everyone cool? We good
Yeah.
to?"
Oh, emotional things are my absolute favorite in games. Like, Philippa can attest to this if you ask her. But at the end, I won't give spoilers, but at the end of that prequel 3-part series, there was a very emotional confrontation that I just absolutely adored, and I was crying by the end of it so hard. And I love that. I think it's definitely the actor side of me being like, yes, emotional. I made other people watch and cry. Perfect.
You've won. That's it. You've won the game. Other people are upset. You've won. Yeah, I need to. We're currently in the like planning and prep stage. This new campaigns. There's a couple of players are working on their characters, thinking out backstories, and some haven't even picked races or classes yet. So I want to try this. There's a big questionnaire I found at one point ages ago, probably read it back in the 5 years ago, that had not only stuff like who's your family, where are they, what do they do now, what do they think about you risking your life to go adventuring, but also stuff around like what do you have in your pockets? What's a keepsake for you? What
Ooh.
Yeah. What do you think of religion? Just completely open-ended questions like that. So I might give that to them and just say, as much or as little as you like, with the evil intent to pull on their heartstrings in 2 years' time when when that family member comes back or something happens.
Absolutely. There's this, so I've been reading up on a bunch of different smaller indie games that are multiplayer and all of that. And one of them that I've done is this fun little game called Under the Floorboards. And one of the things that they do in establishing questions is that, and I think that it's called establishing questions, that is that they have like 5 or 6 questions. And the first one is looking, and for people who don't know it, it's like The Borrower's Secret World of Arietti, that kind of thing. But you are 2-inch tall people and you are living between the floorboards of the Biggie's house. And so one of the questions that they ask is, what in this room, and I think it's the living room, what in this room makes you feel safe? Can be a very innocent, innocuous question. However, gives you a moment as a GM, or in this case, a guiding voice, to be like, ooh, what can I do with that information?
What answers have some people given for that then? Is it mundane, like the pillow in the corner, or is it more abstract, like the warmth from the fireplace?
Yeah, sometimes it's mundane. The example that was given in the game that I ran this week was that they had, those demo CDs that you used to get in the mail or whatever. So it was this demo CD that they had created into their dining room table using a champagne cork in the center.
Oh, yeah.
So it wasn't the physical object of it, but it was the borrowing of it, like finding it and bringing it back to their home. And it was whittling away at that cork so that it would fit into the CD in that center hole. And it was all of the meals that they share around that table. So yes, it was a physical object, but it added so much character and backstory to this one shot that I ran.
Yes, yeah. I don't know what made me think of just like the complete opposite of that, that answer to that question is like what makes you feel safe. This gun, and that's it. That's it. There's no third dimension. It is literally like open book.
Perfectly valid. Perfectly valid. What happens when your gun is stolen from you, or when it gets bent or jammed, or any other thing? What happens when you run out of bullets? What then? What makes you feel safe?
I also have the image of what a small, borrower's gun would be now.
We had that example actually, because they were just like, "Oh, I imagine I have a pistol." I'm just like, "You're 2 inches tall."
Yeah, how does that work?
Where are you getting a gun from? How does that work? No.
or it takes 10 of them to like hold it.
Yeah. God. Considering the fact that a safety pin is like a grappling hook for them, if they bend it
Yes.
around, no.
No, not gonna work. Not gonna
No.
work. Oh, that's see. This always proves to me I need to look into more stuff. I'm hands up the first to say I'm such got my blinkers on for
For
like
D&D?
yeah, but also for like just that is not that answer. That's the root cause. The symptom is only asking questions like who are your family members, which is great,
Mhm.
but it is again, it is still kind of limited. Yes, what have you got in your pocket? But there's still like what makes you feel safe is just such a great open-ended
It
question
is.
to really get those juices flowing. So that's what I'll be doing now is going to that list and adding in the questions of that ilk. Yeah, I need to. We're about to start, as I've said several times, and I'm now just being selfish and mining for advice now. But starting this campaign, real mix of players. One is not novice, but he's only played a couple of times in the past. The rest
Mhm.
are, years and years of experience. What's something I can do, right at the beginning to not only solve the problem of that classic, we need to bring everybody together and
Mhm.
make them go in the same direction, which is difficult anytime, but also that initial like you're now in the world. Like maybe you
Mhm.
could kind of broaden that question to be like at the beginning of every scenario, what's the
Mhm.
kind of every scenario, every session,
Yeah.
what's the kind of tradition perhaps people do to switch your brain over from beep boop, I've done the washing up to now I've got to be this evil lich.
Yeah. One of the things that I like to think about, and this doesn't apply to every session or things like that, but what are people's routines?
Mm,
What do they do in their daily life and what is disrupting them? So maybe that new player, maybe their character is I mean, going off of the classic, they meet in a tavern.
mm,
But what if they are working at the tavern or delivering some mail? Maybe they're a message run or something like that. And they have some grand thing happens that they need to explain. Who do they go to explain that to? Oh, well, maybe the owner of the bar isn't the most trusting in the world, and they see this like one or two people that they seem like they are more trustworthy to
mm,
share this information with. So they will come over and share that. And you can even do things like giving piecemeal information that some characters know and
ooh,
others don't.
mm,
And then, so maybe that new player, the thing that you give them is, you know that these other two characters are in grave danger, and you know that XYZ, like the lich example that you give, the lich
mhm.
is coming for them, whatever it
Yeah,
may
yeah.
be. But you know this teeny bit of information, and you need to get them to trust you, and you need to help them.
Mm,
So it also gives them a little bit more of a direction to go into because people who've been playing for years and years and years, we generally have a good sense of what we need to do. But newbie players, not as much. Like they might have a general idea, concept of it if they've watched any actual plays or things like that. But having that direction, that drive for their character helps to bring them into it as well.
mhm. Having each player have some information, the first thing my lich mind went to was like, oh, it'd be fun to throw in a few red herrings in there. There's a
Mhm.
couple of players that everyone have a piece of information, but a couple are just like completely wrong.
100%.
I don't know how that reflects on me, but
Slightly off from what the actual truth is.
yes. Beware of people in red coats, and it's a blue coat that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, it's something
Yeah.
I've not done it for ages. Starting the new campaign, bringing in new players and stuff, and then suddenly, when they're starting to give me character sheets, I'm like, oh, it's real and it's happening, and I've actually got to get these
Yeah.
people to do something now in a world that I've created. Oh, okay. I can't just turn up every other week and play the game and then leave. And yeah, there's some more work that needs to be done. One final thing I wanted to mention is a tip that I often hear and try to employ, again, not as much as I should, is when you do the descriptions, when you're describing a place, try and bring in the smells and the sounds rather than just the sight. I don't know what part of human nature makes us only focus on like what you can see. You know, so, like that's classic tip 101. What smells can you and smell in this environment? And everyone goes, well, at least I certainly did. Oh yeah, why didn't I think of that when I was writing that description? I don't know why humans only focus on sight, but it's clearly a problem. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a tip.
Well, a really good example, which I've been saying a lot, but going back to that Monster of the Week camp session, the module that I've run many, many times, I have this moment where they are starting to track down this monster that is kidnapping people, and someone smells something in the air, and it's this briny scent. And so that pulls them to the ocean. It pulls them to, okay, I'm smelling this thing. What does this mean? We're in the middle of Ohio. So what does this mean? And so that draws them in further. And there's another thing that I do that I didn't realize that it was a creepy moment until a player said this for a different thing. But I said that a grate opened, like a sewage grate, silently. Like, there was no sound as he pulled open the grate, and he immediately went, "Oh no, I do not like that, because that means that a monster can get out and no one knows that it has left the sewer, and that is terrifying." And I just went, "Oh, that's good to know."
Yeah, that's well creepy. Just the vision, the image of it is weird without any sound. Is already unsettling without any other context. So I guess the answer is there is using or the absence of sound in this example, you know, to immerse the players to convey a certain feeling. We jumped straight to the advanced tactics, not just tell them what they can hear. We've gone to tell them what they can't hear. I love it. Like just straight to the good stuff.
And then you can be like my friend Marcus, who's just like, the silence is silent.
Come on, we've all been there. Yes. I've been at 11 o'clock when you're DMing and you're coming to the end of the session and you're like running on like fumes at that point, and you've got to be like, oh, and the bar man is a man and he works at a bar, and I'm like, that's where we'll end the session because
yep. I've been there. I'm teasing him from afar because he literally just posted about this the other day. Or maybe today. I don't know. Time.
Well, talking of time, we're almost at the end of the episode. Someone's got to keep track. Is there anything you want to talk about that we might have missed or haven't got to yet?
I think that the only thing that we missed was thinking about this applies less in online games, but physical objects. So thinking about like handing your players a potion bottle that has the actual D4s in it, things like that, or a handwritten thing. Someone that I love dearly does amazing, beautiful work at Alderdoodle. I don't know if you know.
Off the top of my head.
Alderdoodle, she, her pronouns. They do these beautiful like scrolls and things like that, like hand lettered, everything like that. Absolutely gorgeous. And so one of the things that I do in my online games, because obviously I can't send physical letters to people or things like that, is I, even just in canva.com, you can create the letters that people receive. You can create all manner of things. I even did for a different module that I run. I did there was a puzzle that I thought was better if it was visual rather than described, and so I went into Canva and I made the puzzle so that I could just show it to them. And it just adds so much more to it because they look at it and they just go, huh? And it makes them think a little bit more than if I just described it to them. So having those handouts, even if it's digital and you're playing online, are amazing and wonderful. And I love them.
I wanted to include in probably several Legend of Zelda games where there's ice and there's sliding blocks, and you have to slide the blocks in a certain way without them falling off the edge. So because once you start to push them, they keep going until they hit an object, right? And if you don't push them in the right, north, south, east, west, they'll fall off the edge of the map and it will reset the puzzle. So I was like, that's cool. Simple enough that most people will be able to solve it. So it's not this weird, like, thesis level puzzle that nobody's going to get within 4 hours. It's just something people can do at a table. But it's like a unique, like, there's no way I can describe that in words.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
you need to have it physically there. Anyway, so that makes me think of, just to go off on a slight tangent, it makes me think of the video game Myst. Did you ever play that?
Yeah. I remember buying like the complete collection once when I was probably way too young to really appreciate what it was going for, and was like, this is just weird.
I finished that game in, I think, 6 hours, and
Wow.
I was just like, I need more, because I love puzzles. Puzzles are just so good. I love them. So if puzzles are in a game, I am immersed.
There we go. Well, that's a perfect place to end the episode on then. Is there anything you want to plug or promote?
Well, I am everywhere as Lionne Cosplay. You can find me on nearly every social media as that. I don't understand Mastodon, though, so don't talk to me there. Let's see. I am a pro GM on Start Playing. There, I am only La Lionne with 2 N's, simply because I am not cosplaying when I am running my pro games, but I am running games literally all the time. It is one of my major jobs. So please join me. It's a fun time.
And as usual, all the links will be down in the episode description. So I would encourage you all to go and check them out. All that's left to say is thank you ever so much, Anya. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a blast chatting with you. I don't know where the time went.
Yes, it just vanished. It just vaporized, as did the rest of the day and the rest of the last 5 years. So yeah, thank you ever so much, Anya. Thank you everyone for listening at home. As usual, like, comment, subscribe. I never get the spiel down. Just go and do the thing. It's very British of me just to be like, just go and do the thing. There. It is what it is. But yes, otherwise, thank you all for listening, and good night.
Yeah, bye.
Now it's time for the Patreon shout-outs. Huge thank you to all my patrons, starting with Josh, Lewanika, and Glenn, the 3 fabulous hosts of Tabletop Journeys who've been on the show several times before and who I'll always invite back. So go check out Tabletop Journeys at ttjourneys.com or at ttjourneys on Twitter. We also have Joe from the Fourth Leg podcast all about giving DMs another leg to stand on. Again, previous guests of the show, and I'd thoroughly encourage you to go and check out their great content. So you can find them at the Fourth Leg on Twitter. We have a good friend of the show, Optional Rule. You can go and find him out on optionalrule.com or at Optional Rule, full of very insightful and educated comments and thoughts and threads on the really nitty-gritty of D&D. We have, what a guy, Matthew Perkins, who is just out there in the world trying to make you laugh. So go and check him out at matthewperkins.net or at Hey It's Matty P, Mattyp. And good friend of the show and one of my table mates, Matthew Street. Go and check out his partner's hustle at virtualtimehustle.com or at mpstreet88 on Twitter.